001 video, the takeaway fixing Washington and our broken world. 1. Introduction. Hi, I'm Ricardo Turullols-Bonilla. I work for Austin ISD, teaching science at the Travis County Juvenile Justice Facility at Gardner-Betts South Congress. Humanity is at the edge. Things have come to the wire. We live in a broken world, and Washington is no exception. But to every cloud there is a silver lining, and we shouldn't let this perfect curative crisis go to waste. This is the deal. I wrote a book addressing the crisis of civilization. My request is that you take off the helmet and be wise open to new ideas. Leaders are needed. And if you think you qualify, please feel welcome to apply herein. So then, given that we're not like the beasts in the field that learn by instinct, and certainly not like angels with a direct line to the heavens, we're Homo sapiens, beings of wisdom. Simply put, what we know we learned because we were taught. The question now is, where did we learn it from? And what exactly is it that we were taught? Where from and what is this takeaway? That is the quest. My claim is that there needs to be a knowledge master key out of which all knowledge particulars come to be. If there are specific cases, that must be because there's a universal principle underlying it. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child, another person. Since we don't learn by instinct but instead are taught, the question then is, what is this one take-home message that is taught to us in culture? In this work, Pardecism, Human Science 101, I rediscovered the takeaway, that there is actually a primeval common sense built in us from get-go. It is something that has been overlooked for the last 3,000 years. The takeaway is that the whole is made up of a triad of parts. The triad parts assemble as the two sides and hypotenuse of a complex right triangle. It's that simple. And this is all we need to know to start fixing our broken world right away. I need to share the takeaway. The good news cannot and should not die with me. It needs to see the light of day. Therefore, I am running for the United States Congress because I know how to fix our broken world, starting with Washington. I am running for the U.S. House of Representatives, District 21, Texas, and I need your help. District 21, Texas comprises Southwest Austin, everything west of I-35, from Buda to Northwest San Antonio, including San Marcos, and the heartland of the Hill Country. Number 2, conclusion. What I am about to present may shock you, but one thing I can promise you, you will not come out of this experience the same person you came in. It is that powerful. Let me cut to the chase and tell you up front about the most wonderful human rediscovery of all times. Later on, standing on one foot, I will walk you through the steps of the argument, but first, let me tell you how to represent the takeaway. What is the take-home message that life teaches us? Let me explain it with pecans, literally with pecans. I teach science, and in physics, I learned early on to explain complicated things by way of user-friendly complex models. So then, without further ado, let's do it. As mentioned, I will start by that conclusion, leaving the argument till later. Let me lay out the pecan seed of life model for the takeaway. By the way, the pecan is actually native to today's southwest United States and northeast Mexico. It is the state tree of Texas, so it is only fitting and proper to name the takeaway model honoring our friendly native pecan. Just as the pecan is made up of a husk, shell, and kernel, so as a complex right triangle, I will map the husk as a square frame background, the enclosed shell I will map as an ellipse middle ground, and lastly, I will map the kernel that is housed inside as foreground. In words, this model is saying that the whole is made up of a triad of parts, meaning that the whole as such unfolds as the triad parts of the two sides and hypotenuse of a complex right triangle. The complex simplifies the complicated. This means that the vertical side of the right triangle represents the imaginary, the horizontal side represents the real, and the hypotenuse stands as it were on the shoulders of both real and imaginary. Perhaps you guys are more familiar with the fact that creation is made up of the divine, and we, the living, in turn, are made up of body, mind, and spirit. Well, it's the same thing here. It can't be all that complicated. After all, it's just primeval common sense. Verily, there's nothing new under the sun. The same applies squarely here. Our postmodern seed of life image dovetails with the tree of life of antiquity. The Kabbalah reception approach came up with the same thing under the acronym PARDES, which is loosely translated as paradise. In a nutshell, all these are equivalent representations of the same rediscovered takeaway. Therefore, they all map one on one. The whole is a triad of parts. The triad parts as a complex right triangle. Divine as whole and triad as spirit, mind, and body. Likewise, the tradition from antiquity of the work of creation has Pardes, paradise, with whole as sought secret, and triad as Derash discover, Remez remit, and Peshat plain. By the way, by rediscovered, I am giving due credit to the Kabbalah reception that first came up with this four-tier foldable under the acronym of Pardes Paradise. My guess is their contribution was disqualified offhand from gaining acceptance by a greater audience by esoteric science labeling. But the times are a change, and today I am here reintroducing the wheel, as it were. Hey, what we're hearing doing is proposing human science 101, be it in budding. Now we have the big pecan of creation made up of culture, religion, philosophy, and science, respectively in the usual order outlined above. No more church-state separation, no more banning philosophy from science. Gone is the broken world of things disjointed. In sight are the whole days of reconstitution moving forward. So then, we just laid out the pecan seed of life model of the takeaway. The takeaway is that the whole is made up of a triad of parts and that the triad parts assemble as the sides and hypotenuse of a complex right triangle. We just finished the conclusions. Now we move on to the argument. 3A argument. So then, let's start from square one with defining our concepts in order to gain clarity in the quest. I tell my students that I can teach them science, but I cannot learn it for them. That's their part. Same applies here. The one take-home message is given to us, but we still need to do our homework. That is, we need to first discover the takeaway, the primeval common sense with which to make sense out of creation. We need to know what we're doing if we're ever to exit Crisis City and enter Paradise Earth. A broken Washington and a broken world underscores a sweeping crisis of civilization. To this end, we must cover all cultural contributions, be they from science, philosophy, and religion. If we want to fully understand our times, we need to go to the very beginning of time itself. Ultimately, it's an inquiry about the origin of the universe at absolute time equal to zero. Standing on one foot, I will now guide you in this expedition in human science, as the Big Pecan seed of life model would have it. Let's start with the contribution of science to the quest of the origin of the universe. Science has it that there are two competing theories as to the origin of mass space-time, the steady-state universe and the dynamic Big Bang theory. Factual evidence of late of galactic redshift and background microwave radiation indicates an expanding universe from a relic explosion of sorts about 14 billion years ago. The last word is not in yet, obviously. Still pending is an understanding of dark energy and dark matter, and ultimately about our catch-all notion of the vacuum. But at least at present, it inclines in favor of a created universe, created out of nothing, apparently. Let's now continue our quest with philosophy about the origin of the universe. Philosophy starts from the premise that nothing can come from nothing, and recognizing the existence of the universe, likewise we have two competing narratives. Plato, on the one hand, in his dialogue Timaeus, tells in myth-like fashion that a demiurge created the universe sculpted from a perfect model. Aristotle, on the other hand, in his treatise Physics, Employing reason arrives at the impossibility of an infinite regression. That is, since effects come from previous causes and it being impossible to access the first cause, then, in order to save reason from self-destruction, feigns that this must be proof of the eternity of the universe. That is, Plato, by myth, arrives at a creator and creation, whereas Aristotle, by faulty reasoning, arrives at an eternally existing universe, but of no creation, no creator, and no creatures. Let us now finish our quest with religion about the origin of the universe. Religion is the only one left standing that could possibly give us the elusive takeaway of the existence of a primeval common sense with which to make sense of things and fix our broken world. Take in consideration, just as science has math as measuring tools and philosophy has dialectics as reasoning tools, so religion has holiness as revealing tool. The guiding thread in all this is whether we need a second direct intervention or simply figure out the takeaway already given from Revelation. The text is the Torah teaching of revelation to Moses at Mount Sinai. 3b Argument. Since we're inquiring about the beginning of time, the obvious place to start our inquiry would be the Bible creation story, as depicted in Bereshit, Genesis verses 1:1 to 2:3. In verse 1:1 we are told, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." But in all this, in all earnestness, what and where and how is the one take-home message? Where hides evil, so to speak? Where you least expect it. The devil is in the details. Evil hides at the translation and interpretation of the very beginning of the Bible creation story. Genesis 1:1 AA. Today's evil is the idolatry of the modern mindset of negating the human spirit of having any connection with the divine. The problem is that we need to somehow separate the virus of modernity from the holy book. If we do not do this, we'll be again, like many others that came before us, overlooking precisely what we are searching for. Verily, a self-defeating venture, setting ourselves up for failure from the start. What lesson does the Torah teaching teaches us in turn as the one take-home message? That is the question. Some might say that there are many take-home messages. I would agree, and further add that if there are many, they are species. But then, which is the genre takeaway? There has to be one from which the many take after, like when one asks, how many beginnings of time are there? Obviously, there's only one beginning of time. However much afterwards there may be many first beginnings of time for specific events. Hey, here is the guiding cue, that the first is the one in our quest for the one take-home message from our inquiry about the origin of the universe. Well, applying this guiding principle, the 7 days of creation starts with a 1 day verses 1:1 to 5, for there is no first day. However much there is a second, a third, and so on until the 7th, the day of rest. This cue guides us to inquire directly to the first one word, Bereshit, in beginning of verse 1:1a. From here we jump directly to the first letter, verse 1:1aa. But lo and behold, it is Bet, B, and not the actual one letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, A. This is where the holy language goes hand in hand with the holy book. To make sense of things in religious endeavor regarding the beginning of things, the holy book must likewise be read from the holy language, namely from the original Hebrew, for much is lost in translation, and thus interpretation is misguiding. We must therefore continue our quest employing biblical Hebrew. For starts, letters have meaning. The letter Aleph, A, means oxhead, which interprets as a silent beginning. The letter Beth, B, means house, interpreted in this context of creation as our home, the earth. And there's the letter Gimel, G, meaning camel, standing for walking. In order to resolve this issue, let's take a closer look at the Hebrew alphabet, just at the lead triad of the first three letters Aleph, Bet, Gimel, A, B, G. A look at the letter Beth, B, the middle one, shows that its bottom part points backward to the letter Aleph, A, all the while its mouth points forward towards the letter Gimel. The opening letter Beth, B, is as if telling us not to look backwards, rather to keep moving forward as time ordering would have it. But as things stand at present, we're at a stalemate in following our own guiding cue with the access to the one-letter Aleph A off limits. We've traveled way too far to have to stop at the threshold. That is, the key thus far has been these standalone cues. Out of the vastness of the Torah teaching, we've been able to narrow down our quest for the takeaway from the creation story, verses 1:1 to 2:3, to one day, verse 1 to 5, and to one word, 1:1a. The problem now is that we're blocked by the first letter Beth, B, from accessing the one letter Aleph, A. But wait, not all is lost. Let's now take a look at the one word 1:1a Bereshit in beginning of and apply the instruction of moving forward. The Beth B is telling us to inquire in the Resh head for the beginning. Additionally, on the other hand, we know from biblical Hebrew that the letter Aleph means head. This is his way of saying, on the one hand, to go forward into the head for the beginning of time, but just do it indirectly, by way of creation. And on the other hand, therein you'll find the template copy of time, just not time itself, for you cannot step backward. So, by way of this roundabout approach, we're finally able to access the one letter Aleph, A, the bottom line, for there's nothing beyond. Simple as that. Immediately we jump at this opportunity and make the connection right away of this one letter Aleph, A, with a complex right triangle. That is, we do the following mapping. The upper arm of the Aleph we make correspond to the vertical imaginary side, the diagonal to the hypotenuse, and the lower arm to the horizontal real side. Verily, the one letter Aleph, A, spells the takeaway. There you have it, a done deal. So then, we finally have the standalone cues of one day versus 1:1, one word, 1:1a, and now one letter, 1:1aa Aleph, the triad of triads. There is no room for doubt anymore in my heart that this is the elusive takeaway, what has been overlooked for these 3,000 years. Not for better, but for calamity for humankind. In a nutshell, the takeaway, primeval common sense, is that the whole is a triad of parts, and that the triad parts assemble as the sides and hypotenuse of a complex right triangle. Selah, there it is. 3c. But ultimately, the proof of the pudding is in the eating and not in the recipe. Let's go ahead and try the takeaway of our one-word Bereshit in beginning of verse 1:1a. It is displayed below, outlined in the square background, in bold inside the ellipse, and with B in on the imaginary vertical side, Resh head beginning on the hypotenuse, and with it off on the real horizontal axis respectively. Lastly, before letting go and moving on, we need to try it on the very first verse, 1:1 of the creation story. But before we do that, we need to seamlessly combine our seed of life pecan model with a Kabbalah reception tree of Pardes, paradise. The enriched version tells us that the virtue of things is that reality can be modeled as a four-tiered foldable made up of a whole ellipse and a triad right triangle. Now, with this notion in mind, let's apply it to flesh out Bereshit in beginning of verse 1:1a of the creation story. This, you recall, is of the utmost importance, because it was precisely its mistranslation and worse interpretation that is to blame for overlooking the takeaway blessing for these last 3,000 years and counting. A faithful translation, coupled by an elucidating interpretation, makes verse 1:1 read as a four-tiered foldable on the ellipse in beginning of, on the imaginary in beginning of created Elohim, on the diagonal created Elohim language, and on the horizontal Elohim is language with the heavens and dialogue with the earth. A compromise reading harmonizing this four-tiered foldable with the customary linear flat one of the in the beginning Elohim created the heavens and the earth would then be as follows. In beginning of, standalone, comma, created Elohim language with the heavens and dialogue with the earth. The foldable four-tiered version of verse 1:1 is not so much different from the customary, other than putting language up front, which is in and of itself no small matter. However, it is keychain next to the rediscovery of the given, the takeaway from the very own creation story. That's the blessing. The primeval common sense is that the whole is a triad of parts and that the triad parts assemble as a complex right triangle. That pretty much wraps it up. But before parting, let's dot the I's and cross the T's with the kind permission of our viewers and listeners. Regarding philosophy, Plato and Aristotle were both half right and half wrong. That is, Plato was right in that the universe was created, says nothing can come out of nothing by itself, but it was created by Elohim, God, and not by a mythical demiurge. As for Aristotle, he was right about the impossibility of an infinite regression, but wrong about privileging reason over a given primeval common sense, upon which reason is ultimately founded in the first place. Regarding science, a complete revamping of its core notions of mass, space, time, and the vacuum of the Big Bang Theory in light of primeval common sense would not be unexpected. And overall, it would be interesting to witness the reconstitution of knowledge from a big pecan approach as herein envisioned, especially as education goes from pre-K to post-PhD. As creatures made in its image and likeness, we can only understand the Creator but through creation, not directly, as we saw lines above. The bottom line message is that the most we'll ever be able to retrieve with us is this blessing of the takeaway, and this is a big deal. And that's the bottom line. Anything beyond that is as futile an endeavor as trying to pull oneself up by one's bootstraps or entering a house by the photograph of its front door. Well, this ends the argument based on the combined cultural manifestations of science, philosophy, and religion. Our conclusion is that the one take-home message, the takeaway, the primeval common sense is that the whole is made up of a triad of parts, the triad parts assembling as the complex right triangle. End of proof. So much for the theory. Now, what are the applications moving forward? Let's now deliver what we promised. Let's make our broken world whole, starting with Washington. But what have we so far? It's inventory time of our power toolbox. Let's do some spring cleaning first, tidy things up a bit to take up less space. Let's see what we have to show for so far after having aligned the postmodern with the traditional versions of the Kabbalah reception. Both are ultimately studies on the Bible creation story then and now. Under different names, so far we have the following models: Pecan Pardes, Seed Tree of Life, four-tiered foldable, primeval common sense, one take-home message, the takeaway blessing, and the given. Phrasing it in the classical style, it would say that the virtue of things is Pardes, the pecan model of reality, that the whole is a triad of parts, the triad parts assembling as a complex right triangle. The reason that the complex right triangle faithfully represents the takeaway is simply because it showcases the things that don't touch that are orthogonal, like the spirit and the body, however, are connected but second story by way of the mind of the hypotenuse. Like my body does not have contact with my spirit, but it is communicated by way of the mind. The same thing works with a coin analogy. The sides do not touch, this side that you see and this side that you do not see, yet they are connected by way of the rim. It is pre-K intuitive. That is the beauty of the pecan model. In following, I will present in quick succession a few lesson plans taken directly from my book, Pardecism, Human Science 101, to showcase how the core subjects of science, math, language, and social studies, and electives as well, can be taught in schools, colleges, and universities. This slide of science showcases that the success of the equation is due to its underlying watermark pecan. This slide of language impresses that it's all about enunciating whole thoughts into sentences, consisting in terms of the triad of subject, verb, and adjective object. This slide on political science exemplifies that the nation or state is ultimately composed out of the legislative, judicial, and executive branches of government. This slide on psychoanalysis illustrates that the whole person is understood as consisting of the triad of the superego and the it, bridged by the ego. Lastly, this slide makes the statement that insofar as we are whole human beings, we need to stay in one piece by way of feeding our humanity, our body by exercise, our mind by studying, our spirit by meditating, and our whole being by the heart through prayer. You get the idea. Growing up whole instead of fragmented with so much metadata, checkered, pixeled, digitalized. Learn instead one big thing, for the rest comes by added measure of experience. Now we move on to some miscellaneous applications of the takeaway blessing to real life situations. Let's move on to politics now. What is democracy all about? Is our democracy Pardes compliant? Our institutions need to be held accountable for the present day deplorable state of the union. That is, how much is the scheme of one man, one vote responsible for the breakdown of our political system? Is the two-party system Pardes compliant? Obviously not, by a long shot. Our two-party system is part of the problem, not part of the solution. The solution instead is to transition to a one-person triad votes. Do the math and convince yourself. Let universalism white stand on the shoulders of the red and blue. Let's move on to economics. Sorry about that. What is the origin of wealth, of good-paying jobs in a science and technology research-driven age like ours, and becoming ever more so as we speak? It is knowledge, and knowledge is housed in the university. Universalism refers to the university as the knowledge institution, as triad protagonist of history moving forward, standing on the shoulders of capital and labor ideologies, as it were. Students, teachers, admins, staff, all personnel, let's make the one take-home message, the knowledge master key, the driver of history moving forward. Let's go for whole universal knowledge. This is where the university comes finally into its proper role. Let's take up the challenge of the Human Sapiens Project of source coding universal knowledge using the pecan T-diagram model of the takeaway. Knowledge is the baton of culture in the race of civilization. Need to let you go soon. Just a few closing items on the way out. With this takeaway, breakthrough blessing, the sky is the limit. 4B applications. I have a calling to institute a culture. I have done the quest in the work of the creation story. Therein I found the takeaway cause, and now must kindle the movement of the whole knowledge age moving forward. I just cannot stress enough the importance of preparing yourself by owning a leadership role moving forward. Watching attentively this video is like getting a high school diploma. Listening to the podcasts on the website is like a bachelor's degree. Reading the book is like a master's. And teaching the takeaway is the PhD. In the following days and weeks and months, I'll put up videos and podcasts on my website addressing more specific issues now that we have laid the foundations. That's the important part, the foundations. Let's wrap things up for safekeeping. If you're serious about making whole our broken world, take the initiative, grab the baton of leadership, and start orchestrating the movement worldwide. Let's turn the page of history. Let's pardes, let's take away. The takeaway was the blessing that was missing to transition from our broken crisis city to the whole paradise earth. The takeaway is that the whole is the triad parts of a complex right triangle. That's simple. Let's do not the reform, not the re-evolution, but instead, let's do the reconstitution. Long live America! Long live the New World! Long live Paradise Earth! So be it. Unleash teacher and student creativity. Lift the ban on the T diagrams, on the triads. Let's make Austin the capital of the New World. Let's make Texas the heartland of the beginning of Pardes, Paradise Earth. Thank you so very much, and God bless.